freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall, and fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side, forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God we praise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall, survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side, forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God we praise you. Whoa, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, we praise you.
Hey, good morning, Trinity. Welcome to Church Online. I'm so glad that you're joining us for worship today. We've got a great worship service planned, an awesome message for this holiday season from God's Word, and I'm just so glad to welcome all of us together today. If we have not met before, my name is Daniel Riddick. I'm one of our pastors here. I have the privilege to pastor our Oakleaf location every single week. And I want to welcome everybody who's watching from Oakleaf and Hammond, and then certainly our online audience. We're really looking forward to what God is going to do wherever you're watching at, what He's going to do in this place today. I especially want to welcome anybody who's watching for the very first time. Thank you for joining us. And hey, listen, we've got a free gift for you, just as our way of saying thank you for joining us in worship today. And you can text the words free gift to 94090. That's free gift to 94090. And that's our way of just saying thank you for joining us today. Hey, listen, one big item I want everybody to know about. Next Sunday, that's Sunday, December the 20th, at 5 p.m. That's going to be our primary worship service for all of our locations next weekend. Sunday, December 20th at 5 p.m. is Christmas at Trinity. And this is one of the largest worship services we have of the entire year. It's our outdoor Christmas candlelight service, and it's going to be happening at our Hammond and our Oakleaf locations at 5 p.m. It's all outdoors, it's safe and socially distanced. We're going to have a great time. At Hammond, it's going to be at our Hammond location. And at Oakleaf, it's actually going to be at Oakleaf High School. Great community event. We want you to be there and bring a friend with you. Going to have Christmas music, candlelight, coffee, hot chocolate, free pictures with Santa. It's going to be one of the highlights of the season. And we want you to join us next Sunday, December the 20th, at 5 p.m. for our outdoor candlelight services, Christmas at Trinity at Hammond and Oakleaf. Hey, listen, we're ready to get back into worship in the Word, and so thank you for being with us today, and let's worship together.
In the darkness, we were waiting, without hope, without light. Though from heaven you came running, there was mercy in your eyes to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word, from a throne of endless glory to a cradle in the dirt. that stone was moved for good, for the Lamb had conquered death, and the dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe, for the souls of all who come to the Father are restored, and the church of Christ was born. Then the Spirit lit the flame. Now this gospel truth of old shall not kneel, shall not fade. By His blood and in His name, in His freedom I am free. For the love of Jesus Christ, who has resurrected me. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. Praise forever to the King of Kings.
Wow, what an amazing time of worship together. Today we have the privilege online to hear from our lead pastor, Pastor Tom Messer, and he preaches and teaches every weekend at our Hammond location. And if you joined us last week, we kicked off a brand new teaching series called The Melody of Christmas. There's so many things to love about the Christmas season, but one of the things that makes it unique is the music. In fact, of all of the holidays, Christmas is the only holiday that has its own catalog, has its own genre of music. Now listen, I know this, and I said this last week. There's two kinds of people in this world. Those of you who love Christmas music and those of you who hate it. But can I tell you what's special about it? Some of those classic Christmas carols, and specifically those Christmas hymns, they contain some of the most meaningful and in many ways life-changing truth about the birth of Jesus Christ and what it means for me and what it means for you and what it means for all of us in this Christmas season. So in this series, The Melody of Christmas, we're unpacking some of the most well-known Christmas carols and sharing a message of hope and life change that comes from them. Today, we're going to look at the classic Christmas hymn, "O Come, All Ye Faithful," and we're going to hear from Pastor Tom Messer. Hey, listen, before we hear from Pastor Tom, we thought it'd be a great opportunity for us to experience that song together. So before Pastor Tom comes, we're going to listen to "O Come, All Ye Faithful," and I'd encourage you, if you know it, wherever you're watching from today, why don't we sing along and receive the message of this song together.
Oh, come, all ye faithful, joyful and triumphant. Oh, come ye,
Good morning. Thank you, Daniel, for hosting today. And we're really glad that you're joining with us for our Sunday worship. And it means a lot to us that you take the time to be with us today. You that can't be in our services live, and it means a lot. I know Daniel talked about just connecting, either subscribing to a platform or also hitting the like and share button. That always is a help. And we're in a little different setting. Normally we'd be recording in the auditorium. So we've had just a little bit of an outbreak ministry-wide. Thankful that we got our college to the end of the semester. Academy has 5 more days to go. Pray for them if you would, and hoping to get there. And then we've had just a little bit of an outbreak where not so much people being impacted or infected with the virus, but people being exposed, people have been. And so we're a little bit on a shorthanded, and we are just really working to get towards the Christmas event next weekend. Both campuses outside, 5 o'clock. Invite people this week. Best way for us to connect with people in the community, people that are unchurched, people not connected to Trinity, is to get them to come to an event like that. It should be a great time together, and hope that you will help us with that. And don't forget our end of the year Christmas offering, end of the year giving. And I'll mention that a little bit in the sermon today, but just want to encourage you. This is a great season. We are in a great season in our church, and a good offering in this season allows us to do some things globally with missionary partners, and we want to give a real good commitment to that, and then accomplish some things here that help us to continue to move forward in the ministry locally. So as Daniel mentioned, we're in a series today picking up on the theme from the Christmas carol, "O Come, All Ye Faithful," and that little repetitive line in the chorus, "O come, let us adore Him," repeated in there. You just heard that in the song a moment ago. And one of the things that we're trying to do is to break through the noise of the whole Christmas season and bring meaning to the birth of Jesus Christ and the significance that it has. And sometimes we less or lose have a less of a spiritual impact or lose a spiritual impact because of the familiarity of Christmas. In other words, Christmas is on repeat and recycle. And it comes up every 12 months, and we really struggle, not just with the familiarity, but also with the cultural challenges. Is this really a commercial event, or is it a holy day and a holy event that we think about? And we get thrown off because the focus becomes on the lights, the decorations, the parties, the family gatherings, instead of a lowly baby who actually is God coming to rescue us. And then there's also a challenge because at times I think people begin to feel like there's a lack of relevance. Here's a story that comes from long ago and far away, and a long ago, far away story does really impact our lives. I like what Tim Keller said about the incarnation. He said, "The doctrine of the incarnation is the ideal has become real, the absolute has become particular, the invisible has become visible. The incarnation is the universe-sundering, history-altering, life-transforming, paradigm-shattering event of history." Said it last week. Clearly, you cannot have salvation without the death of Jesus and the resurrection of Jesus, but you never get there if you do not have the birth of Jesus. So in thinking about what does it mean for us to adore Him? "Oh, come, all ye faithful, let us adore Him." What does it mean for us to love, to worship, to venerate, if you will, the one who came to rescue us? I like what Athanasius, the early church father, said. He became what we are so that He might make us what He is. And in that statement, we find out that there's a problem that Jesus came to solve so that we could have a future we would have never had without Him. So let me give you some reasons today from our text. Hebrews chapter 2, verse 9, we see Jesus, who is made a little lower than the angels for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that He, by the grace of God, should taste death for every man. For it became Him, in other words, it was fitting for Him, for whom are all things and by whom are all things, and bringing many sons unto glory, to make the captain of their salvation perfect through suffering. This teaches us a lot. This teaches us a lot about what the incarnation of Christ really means for us. So let's talk about, first of all, the incarnation models vulnerability. And when I talk about vulnerability, I want you to see that this is a narrative that really begins in the beginning of the biblical story or the biblical narrative. It's trying to get you to see that after creation, Genesis 1 and 2, we have this catastrophic fall. Man falls into sin, and that fall marked the ruin of paradise. And everything that happens in the biblical narrative then begins to explain the history of civilization and how that civilization has not only been ruined and marred by the fall, but how God makes a plan to rescue creation. I'm actually doing some teaching on this in our Wednesday night teaching that's available online. And that is everything from Genesis chapter 3 all the way through the end of the Bible centers on the theme of redemption. And that plan of redemption begins to be revealed and moved to action. It actually reaches its pinnacle point at the moment that Jesus sinks himself into human flesh at his birth. You see, when you begin to understand what happened when Christ became flesh, and you begin to realize that he would have been much safer up there as opposed to down here. You see, up there in heaven, there's no risk. That's what the idea of this text is, actually verses 5 through 11, that God came down for us. He would have been safe up there, but he put everything at risk down here. In other words, he subjected himself to the suffering. He subjected himself to the evil. He subjected himself to all the damage that you would have in creation. Now, make no mistake about it. We have foreshadowings. This is not a one-off event. In fact, you get the sense right from the beginning that God is anxious to come down. And we actually see that the biblical narrative is that God is going to come down as a warrior to save us. That's actually second advent, not first advent. But you find it, like, for example, in the story of Cain and Abel. You remember? Fall, Genesis 3, the first murder, Genesis chapter 4, and Cain kills Abel. And the voice of God comes down to Cain and says, the blood of your brother Abel is crying out to me from the ground. That tells us that God has a history of hearing and seeing injustice and oppression. Not only do you have it there in the story of Cain and Abel, but actually the great biblical account of Israel in slavery in Egypt. Now, this is a narrative. It's a redemptive narrative. It's actually pointing, it's a figure, it's pointing to the ultimate redemption, the ultimate deliverance. And when Israel had been in slavery in Egypt for 400 years, God appears to Moses in a bush. He comes down in the burning bush and he has a conversation with Moses. And he says to Moses, I've seen the affliction. I've heard their cry, talking about the children of Israel. I know their sorrows, and I am come down. Boy, we have a series of Christophanies. You see it. Christophany is a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus. You see it at Sodom and Gomorrah. You see it before Jericho. These are all previews of the incarnation of Jesus. That means that God has been saying to us for centuries, I am not a God that is far off. I'm a God that's near, a God that's nigh, a God that is at hand. I'm not just a God who's curious or interested in what's happening on earth. I'm a God that's totally committed. I'm deeply involved. And you see in this passage, as the story goes on, that Jesus actually is willing to stand up in the midst of his brethren. This is futuristic. And he's not ashamed to call us or to identify us as brethren. You know, when I was younger, so I grew up with three brothers. There's four boys, no girls in our family. And I have an older brother who admittedly, and I don't say this in a disparaging way, was just he was more aloof as a young person than I was. I was more of a social person, and I had a lot of friends, and his friendships were smaller and narrow. I had a friend I was friends with a kid who, if you could, in our small little town where you grew up, you would classify him as a town bully. And he never bullied me. I had a good relationship with him, but he would pick fights with my older brother. And I remember one time going home and telling my dad about my brother getting in a fight with this town bully. And I was telling him how good a fight my brother fought with this bully who was a bully and who I thought is somebody that might have been bigger, stronger, and meaner. My dad said, well, what did you do? I said, well, I was just really proud of him. He said, well, I don't want you to be proud of him. He said, I want you to get involved. He said, if somebody fights him, he's fighting you. And all of a sudden it occurred to me, in fact, it made me ashamed to realize, hey, I was a spectator, I wasn't a participant, and I couldn't wait for the next time that they get into the fight because I realized, hey, a fight with him was a fight for me. Total commitment, total involvement. Can I tell you something? The incarnation of Jesus is the same way. It's saying that our fight became his fight, our problem became his problem, and he took that on. In Western civilization, we value individual freedom. In fact, individual freedoms is a noble value. And yet once you decide to get involved and make yourself vulnerable, you sacrifice that freedom. That's exactly what Jesus did. He gave up his freedom, his rights for us. And you begin in that moment, when you get past that, when you become vulnerable like he became vulnerable, to live counter to the cultural norm. Let me make a couple applications. If you really understand what Jesus did at the incarnation, then it'll change the way that you view church membership. Think how we look at attending church versus church membership. See, you can attend a church but not be involved. You can attend church and not be deeply committed. But once you cross that line, once you begin to live counterculturally, once you begin to live incarnationally, then you're going to risk your comfort zone and involve yourself in ways that require you to lose your individual freedoms. That's part of the countercultural nature of being a church member. Put it in the context of this, in the context of living together versus marriage. You know, living together is like, it's like friends with benefits, right? It's like enjoying the benefit of marriage without paying the cost of being in a married covenant relationship. But once you get married, you make yourself vulnerable. You actually are putting yourself out there at risk. You're making a promise. You become willing to share everything emotionally, physically, financially, relationally. It all gets offered up. Or how about think the way that we view giving, sporadic giving versus tithing. See, when it comes to giving, if you're going to live countercultural, you don't give when it's convenient. You don't give out of your abundance. You're putting God first. You're saying, I'm intentionally going to live on less because I'm willing to commit myself to obedience to God in ways that are going to impact my life and impact my freedoms. You know what the big word is in 2020? It's social distance. Let me tell you something. While there may be a good reason for you to be socially distant, there's never a good reason for you to be spiritually distant as a follower of Jesus Christ. He, at his incarnation, made himself vulnerable, and you and I should make ourselves vulnerable too. So the incarnation not only makes us vulnerable, makes Jesus vulnerable to us, but the incarnation creates a pathway to triumph through suffering. So let me just remind you that in this world, there's evil and suffering. It's inevitable. And the incarnation says that anything you have or will experience, Jesus has already been through. Let's connect the dots. Go down to verse 14. He says here in verse 14, he also himself likewise took part in the same flesh and blood. That's where we get that expression, he sunk himself into human flesh. Not just in human flesh, but he made himself subject to all that comes as a result of the fall. In verse 16, he took on the nature of the seed of Abraham, which means that he experienced all that humanity was subject to. That's why Jesus didn't come as a perfectly formed, fully mature, completely adult human being. He was born as a baby, which means that he was born in weakness. He grew up in poverty. He and his family fled persecution as immigrants. He was forsaken by those that were supposed to be his friends. He was lied about, betrayed, sold for 30 pieces of silver, and he suffered and then he died. That's what makes him, as the Bible describes him, a man of sorrows who's acquainted with our grief. You talk about not being socially distant. Jesus became very involved in our suffering. That means that what you're going through, he's experienced. He knows what it is, like some of you, to see the sickness all around you, to understand and relate to the isolation that you experience, the fact that people are losing loved ones and people living in depression, and in fact, even people experiencing prayers being unanswered, disappointment with God. Jesus took on human flesh. If you actually connect verse 14 and 16 together, in the middle of that, it says that through death, he might destroy him that had the power of death. So everything that's causing the corruption and the suffering in the world, that is the devil. And Jesus destroyed that and destroyed all those things that we're subject to through a lifetime of bondage. What that does for us is actually this. It helps you to have poise and grace, clarity, and understanding. Christianity never says you will not suffer. What Christianity actually does, it gives you a coherent explanation for the suffering that you're going to go through. And it gives you a promise that because of your suffering, things are going to get better. Go back to verse number 9. We see Jesus, who's made a little lower than the angels. That's his incarnation for the suffering of death, crowned with glory. So here's what it is. It's humility, incarnation. It's suffering, crucifixion, death that leads to exaltation. You see, the ultimate exaltation of Jesus. And by the way, if you want to know how that relates to you and me, read Romans chapter 8 or 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and understand that what you're going through today is only a part of the journey, and it's on the pathway to the ultimate eternal exaltation that you're going to experience as a shared in partaker, not just in the sufferings of Jesus, but also in the inheritance and the reward of Jesus, which says to us, God came down. He came down to make sense out of the suffering that you and I would experience in life. Well, there's a lot of people that are confused. There are a lot of people that have unanswered questions. There are a lot of people going through sadness in their moment. But if you keep looking at Jesus, you'll find a coherent explanation for all that you're looking for in your life. So the incarnation of Jesus, it's what helps us to see and make sense of the fact that he's going to model vulnerability for us. He's going to show us the pathway to triumph over suffering. But then the incarnation of Jesus instills hope. You see, and I mentioned this last week, that there's a deep belief in every heart that knows that this world is not our home. And this life that we're living is not our hope. In fact, our hope, our world that we're living in has been ravaged by sin and brokenness, which actually causes us to focus on for a moment. Just think about this, that there's two parts of the Advent. There's the first coming of Christ. That's what we are celebrating at the birth of Christ. But there's this future Advent, this coming again Advent, where Jesus comes not just as a baby, but he comes, if you will, as a champion. Look at the expression in verse number 10, to make the captain. That's the Greek word archegos. You'll find it translated in various translations as champion, captain, author, hero. Say, what's it pointing to? Well, go back to the story of David and Goliath. It's a familiar story, one that almost everybody that has ever heard the Bible story knows the David and Goliath narrative, right? So Goliath comes out representing the army of the Philistines. He comes out as, if you will, their champion, as their captain. And he says, send somebody from your midst, from your army, to fight with me, and it's going to be a winner take all. Think of it as a combination between WWE and mixed martial arts, right? So you're going to have this brutal mixed martial arts, think cage fight, winner takes all. And David comes out not as the favorite, but he comes out as the underdog. Not as the obvious winner. He comes out in the most unusual way. He comes out in his weakness, right? And he takes on this giant of a man, this giant Goliath. Well, let me tell you something. Jesus is the greater David. he took on a bigger giant than Goliath. He took on the giant of death, the giant of sin, the giant of Satan, and slew them by his death on the cross. And what we do is in that narrative, you remember how the children of Israel came down off the mountain into the valley of Elah, and they came with a courage and they came with a hope because the champion of the Philistines is dead. Listen, the battle's already won because of what Jesus did on the cross. He is the captain of our suffering. And so we can look at him. In fact, we're told to look at the cross and keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, not just what he did for us in the past, but to keep our eyes fixed on the future coming of Jesus Christ. When he comes a second time, he will not be disguised as a baby incarnate. He will come as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. I love the great C.S. Lewis quote, "Our Mere Christianity, our great captain, has opened a cleft in the pitiless walls of the world and bids us come through." You've heard me say before, Jesus came from the world of the ideal, the world of heaven, into the world of the real, earth, and he punched a hole in the concrete wall that exists, that separates us from the world of the ideal so we could leave the world of the real and be found in the world of the ideal. So where do you get the courage? Where do you get the hope? Not because he came once, but because he came once so that he might come again. Let me tell you something. You may be going through some deep, difficult times, some dark waters in your life today, but your hope is in Jesus Christ. When he comes, he will rectify all injustice. He'll rewrite the story of your life, and you'll experience all that God intends for you. That's why the carol got it right. "Oh, come, O ye faithful. Come, let us adore him." Let's put our eyes on him. You see, the incarnation gives us meaning for life. It helps us to connect the dots. It helps you to know that you can be as committed to him as you can ever be committed to anything in life because of what he's done for you. When I think about this Christmas season, I want you to move to that kind of commitment. Think about it as it relates to church membership. Think about it as it relates to your relationships around you. Think about it as it comes to your finances and giving in this end of the year. And then think about it, what it does for your whole life. You can give your heart to Jesus Christ. In fact, if you want to today, you want to have a spiritual conversation with somebody about your spiritual needs, the great need of your life for salvation in Jesus Christ, text the word pastor, 94090. Somebody will respond to you by text, set up a time to have a conversation with you, and they'll help you to know what it is to put Jesus Christ first in your life, to receive this baby that has come at Christmas. Hey, we want you to have the best Christmas ever. The best Christmas ever starts with a relationship with Jesus Christ, the one who Christmas is all about. 94090, text the word pastor, and know that we want to see God work in your life in a great way. God bless you. Thanks for joining us today, and trust that you have a great Christmas season.
Wow, that was such a powerful word from Pastor Tom. And I don't know about you, but I'm thankful for the incarnation, the coming of Jesus, and how it changes absolutely everything. Hey, listen, let me say this, and I want to echo what Pastor Tom has already said. If you've made a decision to follow Jesus today, or you need some prayer or counsel from a pastor and somebody who can help you on your spiritual walk, let me encourage you right now to text the word pastor to 94090. That's pastor to 94090, and somebody will reach out to you in just 24 hours or less, and we'd love to help you in your spiritual walk and your relationship with Jesus Christ. Hey, listen, for all of our church family who are joining us online today, if Trinity is your church home at Hammond or Oakleaf, let me encourage you to be faithful in the giving of your tithes and offerings. Everything that's given goes to further our mission, which is to help everyday people discover an extraordinary life with God. There's so many easy ways to give, and certainly the easiest ways are online at our website at tbc.org/give, or you can also text in your gift, and you can see all of the giving information on your screen today. Hey, listen, one more time, I just want to thank you for joining us in worship today. We pray that the worship and the word has been a blessing to you, and no matter where you're watching from today, it has been a good day in God's house. Have a great day.
fall like lightning. I saw darkness run for cover, but the miracle that I just can't get over, my name is registered in heaven. I believe in signs and wonders. I have resurrection power. Still the miracle that I just can't get over, my name is registered in heaven. And my praise belongs to you forever. Oh, this is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify. My Jesus Christ the righteous, I'm justified. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. Sons and daughters, washed in blood and washed in water, sing the praises of the Spirit, Son and Father. Our God will finish what He started, and our God will finish what He started. This is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story, and I'll testify. By Jesus Christ the righteous, I'm justified. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. If I'm not dead, then you're not done. Greater things are still to come. No, I believe. If I'm not dead, then you're not done. For greater things are still to come. No, I believe. If I'm not dead, then you're not done. Greater things are still to come. No, I believe. If I'm not dead, you're not done. Greater things are still to come. No, I believe. This is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify. By Jesus Christ the righteous,